Samson had great potential. Announcement was given by God as to what he would do in his life. Divine intervention even caused his conception. He had godly parents, and he had a call upon his life. Samson, he started out so well, but he ended very poorly. Why? Because choices have consequences. Samson was led by the flesh. He made unholy, ungodly choices, and he consistently chose his way over God's. Welcome to the Word for 2021. Today, we're in Judges chapter 14. The first thing that we read about Samson here in this chapter, in verse 1, is that Samson went down to Timnah and he saw a woman. Samson let his lust guide him. He looked, if you would, at the frame rather than the internal picture. All he saw was the woman. He didn't know anything about her. In fact, he even didn't talk with her until verse 7. But he wanted her simply because of what he saw. He went to his parents and he said, "I have seen a Philistine woman. Now, go get her for me as my wife." His parents, they resisted. They said, "Isn't there an appropriate, acceptable woman among your people?" But Samson then said to his father, "Get her for me. She is the right one for me." As we see Samson's interaction with his parents, it's demanding, it's disrespectful, and it's dictatorial. Samson's parents, they seem to be submissive, lenient, passive, indulgent of their boy. Now, God had made it very clear that his people were not to intermarry with those around them. But the parents, they listened to their boy, and the boy simply listened and followed his own lust. As a side note, let me talk to you about children and parents for just a moment. I've seen it so many times. When children are not taught to respect and obey their parents, they then will not respect any authority, even God. In other words, if they don't learn to respect their parents, they will not respect God either. When parents permit, allow, or tolerate very bad behavior, such as disrespect of them, backtalking, or disobedience, their children's behavior and attitude, it doesn't get better, it actually gets worse. Without loving discipline, parents actually can harm their children for their future. Because of permissiveness and a lack of discipline, the children today in our society, they do not have a respect for authority, and what we see all around us, it looks more like anarchy. The idea that most people have today is, I don't have to listen or submit to anyone except myself. That was the attitude of Samson. Now, because Samson did not respect his parents, he also did not respect the gift and the calling that was upon his life from God. Now, he was to be a Nazirite. That meant that he was not to drink any strong fermented drink. He was not to touch a dead carcass. But Samson, he violated, he played loose with those vows. Well, how do we know? Because one, he killed a lion. And then later he went back and he opened up the carcass of that dead lion to find honey. And then he took some of that honey, ate it, gave it to his parents, and didn't tell them where it came from. Then, as we continue to read in this chapter, as he was getting ready to marry this Philistine woman, he held a feast. Now, a feast would customarily also have a lot of wine and a lot of drinking. And during that feast, he also wanted to trick 30 of the attendants that were there. He told them a riddle, but he would not give them the answer. And if they could not give him the answer, then they had to give him 30 sets of clothing. Well, the people went to his wife and they said, "You need to find out the answer." What does she do? For 7 days, there is nonstop crying. She's wearing him down till finally he tells her what the answer is. She goes and tells the answer to the men. The men then give the answer to the riddle to Samson. In response, full of anger, Samson leaves. He finds 30 other men. He kills them. He strips their dead bodies of their clothing, and then he gives those 30 attendants 30 sets of clothing. Then he leaves and he goes back to his father's house. The wife that he was going to marry then is given to another man. As we see Samson's life unfold here at the beginning, it's filled with flaws and with failures. He's not the ideal leader. I like the way that devotional writer Wendy Blight said this about Samson. It's important to know that God, working through Samson, did not validate his sinful choices. God used Samson despite his failings. God purposed from birth that Samson would play a role in delivering his people from bondage to the Philistines. And that is exactly what God did. Samson was an unwilling instrument that God used to accomplish his purposes. Samson's lust and arrogance caused him to disrespect his parents, to violate his God-given vow, to deceive his parents. And how did he end up? He ended up disappointed and disillusioned. You have to ask the question of Samson's life. What mightier things could God have done through Samson if only he had a different attitude? What could God do with us if we had the right attitude? Thank you for joining the Word for 2021.